So we've all seen designs like this all over Pinterest and Instagram, but exactly how do you recreate this sort of look for your clothing brand? How do you get the effect, the text, the design? There's a little bit of finesse you need to understand it in order to make a complete look like this, and that includes a lot of layer styles to make everything blend and look seamless. I've seen a lot of people try to make this, but you can always tell it's like not the same, you know? So in today's video, I'm going to show you guys exactly how to get this sort of look for your clothing brand. Let's get straight into it. Firstly, let's go ahead and set up our documents. For this one, we're going to go 3000 by 3500. You can make this larger or smaller depending on how much your computer can actually handle. Other than that, ensure that your resolution is at a minimum of 300 dpi, and let's go ahead and get started. Now, a major key element for this whole sort of design is a custom typeface or sort of font. This will literally elevate you from the rest of the crowd. Start off by getting a nice, I guess, plain basic script font or any sort of blocky font that you want to use as a base for your sketch. Drop down the opacity for the actual layer so you can make sure you're not drawing on that layer and you can still visibly see the actual reference. Make a new layer on top of that and go ahead and go to town with a red marker or sort of brush and start sketching around the font, making cool shapes around the actual letters, which will then dictate how your font turns out depending on what sort of style you go with. Once you finish your sketch, go ahead and remove the reference layer and start introducing the actual black outline for your final design. For assistance, I would highly recommend turning on the smoothing all the way up to 100 to 78, which allows you to get really clean lines. For myself, I'm going with this flame look because it's going to dictate how the rest of the design looks, and it's also going to be a good statement piece for the graphic. Once you finish your actual outline, go ahead and remove the sketch layer by deleting it and get the paint bucket fill tool or press G on your keyboard as a shortcut and fill that in. Make sure to double click it so it's fully filled in with black. After that, I like to put it through Illustrator to keep it as a vectorized image in case I want to use the font for a later date. Now, this is not mandatory, but I would highly recommend it as it cleans up the text automatically when you put it through image trace, and it makes it just easier to use later down the line. Like I said, this is not a mandatory step, but I just recommend it because it's better for you. Go ahead and introduce your image. Now, for me personally, I just used Midjourney to generate these using AI. The prompt that I used was kid with dreads, isolated on a white background, airbrush sort of look. Now, isolating it on a white background is sort of a cheat code. You can go ahead and cut out your image using the magic stick tool and press Q while the selection is still active to go ahead and see if you need to make any adjustments. This cuts down your cutting time by almost like 50%, but I always traditionally work with the pen tool when cutting out images because you get a more accurate sort of cut that you are happy with. Now, I'm going against my own personal rule when I say don't leave random limbs cut off, but I'll make an exception for heads because when you're doing a head, it's easier to mask with like a chain or something like that, you know? With the black brush, I'm simply drawing on the actual mask for the photo and cutting out the head that way. I just found it the easiest rather than making a whole new selection, and then I can just go ahead and grab a larger brush and get rid of the rest of the body. I also generated this mask, which is going to be the main feature for this actual design, and we can go ahead and cut that out and then warp it to fit on the actual character's face. The color of the mask was a little bit too close to the skin tone of the actual character, so I went ahead and added a adjustment layer, which is a hue/saturation. From there, I just played with the color so it was a bit more dark/purplish and added a mask to keep the green in a, I guess, circuit board, which is the proper color for that. And then from there, I just cut that out. To get this mask on top of his face, I went ahead and just aligned it with his eyeballs. Went ahead and dropped the opacity down, played with a bit of warping, and then added in a mask where I could cut out around his dreads and his facial features so it looks like it's sitting flush on his face. Adding in a new layer, I want you to go ahead and grab a sample from a dark area, which is going to be that color, and then go ahead and add in a shadow around the mask. This is going to allow the mask to look more complete with the image and sit a bit more flush with the actual face. Some other cool things you could possibly do is add a glow, which is a new layer on top of the mask, and go ahead and get a very soft brush and just go over a couple of times the same layer which is going to add this sort of outer glow image or outer glow effect to the actual image. From there, you can go ahead and play with this and add in a bigger, sort of darker brush, and you can add a glow around those immediate lines, so it shows it's dissipating light, which is what light does. It gets diffused. But yeah, that's how you make it glow. This is not needed. I think these are just little things that make you stand out regarding your graphic. You should have an image that looks like this to this point. From here, we're going to go ahead and start playing with the text, because now we have the focal point, which is the head, in place. First order of business is to introduce the text back in, because we're going to start playing with it. The first thing you're going to want to do is make a duplicate if you haven't made a duplicate already. After that step is complete, make sure you rasterize if you need to rasterize the image, and then right click, transform, and then start playing with the warp. Now essentially you want the focal piece to stay on the face, so the way you do that is by rounding out the text so it brings leading lines to the face, and that's going to allow you to have a balanced graphic. Like I said before, the font dictates the rest of the graphic. From here, we're going to go ahead and play with the actual blending options of this graphic and make the font look crazy. I already have layer styles that I've been working on for the past year, and every single year I put these up on my website. I think this is layer style everyday version 3 right now, and these are all from accumulations of projects that I've worked on that are very fun. I'm just going to go ahead and put up the settings for you guys, so make sure you just pause and copy as we go. Adding in a new artboard, you can go ahead and add a star into the center of that artboard. It has to be a cutout, so if it is a PNG from Google or something like that, ensure that it's cut out, because we're going to be using it to isolate and make a brush with. This is a fairly simple process. The first thing you want to do is make sure your star is selected. The next you guys want to do is open the window for the brush settings. After that, you can go ahead and type into help, define brush, or you can go ahead and just search for the define brush, and after that you should be able to just simply add in your brush. After adding in the brush, it's just a matter of going into the brush settings of that brush and adjusting the spacing, and we can use it as a sort of star brush for the rest of the graphic. I did this in my last video and people said, oh, it was going too fast. So that's essentially how you make a custom brush for your graphic. Essentially what we're doing with this star brush is masking out the cutoff limb. Like I said before, cutoff limbs are kind of not it. The exceptions I make is heads, because it's easy to mask, and this is how you mask them out. Next, we're simply going to go into the blending options and add a sort of effect. I wanted to go with this sort of grunge, like star burning effect, and this is basically all the settings to get it done. It's just basically a stroke, inner glow, outer glow, and you can play with it to adjust it to the sort of graphic that you have. So if it looks too aggressive and the stroke's too much, simply just remove the stroke, and that's basically it. So in one of Virgil's interviews, he said brand your graphics very heavily, because when people are walking around, you start to notice the brand a bit more if there's a bunch of graphics or if there's a bunch of styles that you usually do. So I wanted to go ahead and add in my logo, which is a circular logo, and then go into the blending options. For this, we're going to be using the same effect that we did for the actual star necklace, but we're not going to remove anything. We're going to keep it as is, and you can see how it elevates the rest of the design. It complements the actual main typography, even though the colors are a bit different. They're in the same hue, which brings this nice calming look. Heading back to the main typography, I want to add a noise to this outer glow, because you cannot print perfect blends of outer glow. It never works. It always has this bludgy sort of look. So adding a noise allows the computer to print, I guess, dots, or your screen printing machine to burn in dots rather than this blend that doesn't look right. The next element, we're going to add some more custom typography, but this time it's going to be a bit more rough, and it's going to just say studios, so Revision Studios, or Rev Studios, I guess. It's just an abbreviated version of Revision. The next thing you guys are going to want to do is open blending modes even before you start drawing, and just reset the blending modes, and the stroke, you just want to make it simply black. I had my colors the wrong way. Sorry, I didn't even notice they were the wrong way till now. And then for the color overlay, just set it to a simple white. And the brushes that I'm using are by Wave and Water. Now these brushes are technically used for actual graphics in terms of painting, digital painting, but I've found that they work really well, especially in streetwear when it comes to blending and stuff like that. I use these brushes religiously, and I haven't changed it up in about 3 years, unless it's something like a flare brush or something like that. But these are literally my go-to brushes, and you've seen them and you've seen me use them throughout this whole journey of my YouTube channel. I went ahead and added in another stroke on the inside and one stroke on the outside to, I guess, accentuate this sort of border look where it's like a drawn in sort of graphic. Well, it is a drawn in graphic, but you know what I mean, where it's like this comic book sort of heavy grunge style. That's what I did. Next, we're going to go ahead and add in some more type to, I guess, add something to the face, as it's looking very empty and plain at the moment. So we're going to add some tattoos, I'll say like save the use or save me, revision, etc. And it's fairly simple. Just find a good blocky typeface that you're using, or it could be any sort of typeface that looks cool, that would be like a nice tattoo. And then from there, all you have to do is just blend it in using blending options. And instead of using the classic overlay, like the blending options that they have, you can go within the actual blending settings and then adjust it that way. Always ensure that you're holding shift while you move these little anchor points, because it allows you to move one at a time and not the full thing, because it's just going to remove the image because it's going to do it at its harshest point. As I go about adding in these tattoos, I'm going into the warp settings and warping around like the forehead and the skin, trying to make it look a bit more realistic than it actually has to be. And that's just me going into the whole blending again. Always try to blend in your graphics so they look, I guess, not as realistic as possible, but your realism has to be at a certain level for your design to flow very well. To tie in the full graphic, I want you to make a new layer, and within the Wave and Water brush set, I want you to go ahead and grab this brush here, and you can set the brush setting to dissolve. From here, I want you to go ahead and just draw like a base underplate for the graphic, which is the graphic is going to sit on, and it's just going to tie in the rest of the graphic together. Right click the base plate and head into the blending options, and simply all you want to do is just change the color to a red. I already have the color selected from the other graphic. You can just select any sort of red that's coming, or any sort of color that's coming from the text. You notice how these graphics are just sitting on top of the red. The way you can go ahead about making it blend a bit better is go back into the settings of the blending options of each graphic, and you see the drop shadow. I want you to play with the distance and also the size. It looks like the ink of the graphic is bleeding out on top of the base plate. Next, I want you to group everything, and from here I want you to add in a curve adjustment layer, and I want you to just play with the shadows and drop them down a bit, and also play with the high points and bring them up a bit. From here, I want you to go ahead and add in a hue/saturation, and I want you to drop the saturation to -29. Now these reds are very, very red, and we want to take that away so we can go for the more vintage look. Now this gives us a very complete look, but we're going to go ahead and turn that off for the meantime while we work on the back graphic. Going to start by cutting out this image, adding in a new artboard. I'm going to go ahead and introduce my logo and then turn it into a brush. With the brush settings, we can change the perspective of the actual brush and make it look like he's floating or coming off the ground using our logo as a sort of symbol. Basically, like the kid's getting abducted by like Man in Black. So that's the whole visual reference that I have in my brain going on. By setting the artboard to black, we're able to visually see our brush strokes if we want to make a sort of glow looking effect. Now, like I said before, these glows and these gradients don't really print that well. So we're going to back it up with the back plate, but for now, we're just going to make it look pretty by adding in this very soft glow around that revision logo. Now I'm going to set it to dissolve, but as you can see, it doesn't look the best. So I'm going to go ahead and just switch it back to the normal blend mode because it looks better that way. From here, we're going to have to make the glow look a bit more realistic. So using a clipping mask, we can clip a new layer onto the boy, and then from here we can grab a softer brush that's very small and create highlights from the ground onto his clothing. Following the shadows and highlights of the actual pants and textures, we can get a very realistic look. Instead of using two different main typefaces on the back and the front, we're going to go ahead and introduce the front typeface to the back, but we're simply just going to warp it and make it look a bit different by playing with the dimensions of the actual typeface. Basically highlighting the centerpiece, which is this kid floating into the sky. Furthermore, let's go ahead and introduce a new font. I guess it's the same font from the tattoos, just saying save the youth. And we're just going to copy the same layer style that we did for the revision logo on the front. Next order of business is basically this kid has dreads, but the kid that we cut the image out of doesn't have dreads. So we're going to put this layer on top. We're going to drop down the opacity, and then we're going to draw in fake dreads. Adding in a new layer, we're going to go ahead and add in a base plate, the same as we did to the front, but just for this back piece right here. We need consistency for the back and the front design, so that includes all the typefaces. Essentially, all I've done is copied over the layer for studios and then put it onto the back and then use the rubber to rub out studios. And now I'm going to draw in a new text. Like everyone else, we're just going to go for the classic tour look, I guess, and just say sold out. That's about it. In regards to textures and finishing touches, I want you to go ahead and make a duplicate of the layer once everything is grouped in one to group, and then convert that to a smart object. Go ahead and head over to filter gallery, but ensure that your colors are set to the original black on white, and then go into filter gallery. From here, I want you to pick the graphic pencil. Copy these settings and go ahead and press OK. Next, I want you to set that layer to overlay, which is going to add those black textures onto the actual graphic. I want you to repeat that for the back design, and once that's complete, I want you to group both that layer and the original layer underneath into one solid group. The reason being is we're going to go ahead and remove the shadows so we can put it on a black t-shirt. Head over to select color range at black, and then fuzziness at 12. Make sure it's on the shadows, press OK, and you should have an image like this. Go into your mask and press G once you have a black paint bucket filled, and then it will remove the shadows. Repeat that for the back design also, and that should be complete, ready for mockups. I wanted to make a sleeve design, and I've just launched some new racing vectors, and they have a bunch of sleeve designs that are perfect for sweaters and hoodies and long sleeves. So I went ahead and just added this one in, added the same effect that we have on the main typography, and then put that into the mockup. What better way to mock it up than on a hoodie? Obviously this design is not made for a hoodie, so I went ahead and removed the kangaroo pouch first, and then I added in these side pockets. There are hoodies that come like this, and they're meant for graphics that are a bit more heavy, like t-shirts. I went ahead and just changed the color to black, added in the mockups, and then added in the sleeve design simply on top. I went ahead and did the same with the long sleeve, just simply dragged the mockups onto the long sleeve, and that was about it. For the t-shirts, I wanted them to be a white/cream, so that meant putting back in the shadows and changing the back plate for the back design to a different color. I went with this nice little pink, and it added a really nice element to the full graphic. I think it looks better as pink anyway. So let's go ahead and rate the design. I give it a solid 9 out of 10. I hope you guys learned something new, and I'll see you guys when I see you. Peace.